First off, we're going to mostly be walking through Acorn TV today. And then we can also, I think UMC is still in flight more or less with some feedback. So we can sort of briefly touch on that, but they all follow the same schema, so it won't be too difficult to adapt it. And so from your basic Braze training, again, I'll focus more on like the things that Braze didn't already provide you as part of their training. But as you get started into, you sort of come into this template screen in the Acorn project, and you'll see a list of all the different templates that have either been migrated or actively being worked on. And while you don't necessarily need to build templates every time you want to send a new campaign, I recommend you do so just because it's easier to like QC and manage the content in this format. For when you start to put it into campaigns, it gets just a little bit heftier to manage, and this is just a little bit more of a cleaner view. That's not to say that you can't do it the other way, and certainly a lot of clients of ours do it that way. I'm just a little biased to liking to having things in sort of a certain flow, like in build process we do here, and then once it's approved, we then move it into a campaign, just so there's a little bit more, there's less structure of like where things are. You know, if it's not yet live, then always go here for the content. But again, that's entirely based on how you guys want to run your workflow, but just as an FYI. Okay, and then in addition, you have on your top nav here different options for different template types. In this case, we primarily focused on email, so that will be the large majority of things that we'll look at here, as well as what's called content blocks. And kind of think of content blocks as the same thing as sale through includes. And so they will cover essentially all the different repeatable blocks of content that we're leveraging throughout different parts of the templates. And so we've created quite a few here as a way to just make it scalable for different components that are used in several different emails. And you can actually see the count of inclusion that they're used in here. So a good example is like the footer menu campaign, which is pretty prevalently used, covers 38 templates, whereas the header as well will cover 39. There's slight variations on the header, which is why you have some differences there. And then the Acorn original header that has a separate one, which is used in one template. So there's definitely like quite a few different options here. And then also having different blocks that are used in different templates. Now, if you click on here into these numbers, you can actually see what templates they're used on. That's kind of a good way to confirm, like, okay, what template would I be using this on as an example? And so, of course, if you click on something that's used on everything, you'll basically just get everything in there. If you click into one of the content blocks, you will be able to see the HTML. You can also copy the liquid tag here that dynamically pulls it in. But the clicking on edit content block here will actually allow you to make updates to it, right? And so here, for this example, this is our full width black background. That includes the logo in here. And so there's just a bunch of content in here that powers that to happen. And if we preview into it, we'll be able to see how that looks on different devices. Note that full width content in some browsers doesn't actually appear as full width. Like Gmail is a good example of that. They automatically add left and right padding on their mobile application. So just kind of take it with it. Using the preview here will help you kind of basically assess from the HTML perspective if it's full width or not, which you can see here. But of course, there are adjustments that we make for different clients, which is why sometimes it will look a little funky in here, but that's kind of anticipated. But as long as you run it through your email and ACID and verify on your own devices, you'll be able to confirm whether or not it displays correctly. It's just kind of the nature of how these things render the content. You can also add tags into these different items too. If you wanted to say like tag this specific template, you could add a description in here. I try to make the titles as descriptive as possible. White logo, black background, header Acorn. So that generally should fulfill a description, but if you need additional context in here, you can also add it here as well. I just recommend using a good naming because it's the easiest way to manipulate it because you can't see that description when you're inside another template. Same thing kind of goes along with different menu items as well. And so again, this is kind of pulled dynamically throughout templates. So as you make updates into these specific assets, it also updates the rest of the, it updates anywhere it's used, right? So it's sort of a nice scalable way to like make adjustments. Also comes with kind of a big responsibility, right? You want to make sure you're actually QCing this stuff probably outside of where you're actually before you deploy it, like I would do some testing on it again, just because changes will reflect immediately across all templates. So it's just a way to kind of do it as a safety check. So that covers content blocks. Again, you have draft options here. You also have active options here. And so if something's not active, it'll be in draft. You can also archive things. And then if you want to see everything, you could just in this one view. Now to go on to the actual email template. So first off, your starting point will generally be this Acorn master template, which is the literal master template of all aspects and attributes and everything else that we have that covers all of your different use cases, or most of your use cases. I think there's might be some slight tweaks that aren't appropriated here, but either way, this is generally how we build things off of, as we use a consistent template more or less to make sure that we're not. It's sort of a great way for us to make sure that like if we need to go in and like create a new template, we'll just use whatever we have consistently in here. So you can kind of use this as a point of reference. Of course, like your content may fall outside of here. This is just basically all blocks put together, and so it has a lot of applicability if you wanted to take different sections. It certainly could just copy an existing template and do some tweaks to it as well. Okay, so in terms of the how to actually edit this stuff, how to leverage it, etc. So first off, you always want to use the preview here, because there is like an example, this content block doesn't render inside the right preview initially. After you hit preview though, it will. It's like a Braze function where it just kind of updates that sidebar. Same thing with some of the footer content as well. I think this is actually hard coded, but essentially it's just a way for you to be able to access some of the different aspects here. Okay. And then generally what we recommend is that you find the section that you want to leverage, right? So in this case, get connected, the easiest thing to do is just to search for this. And then that will in the comments here, these HTML comments, you'll actually be able to see where the section begins and ends, right? And so another way you can do is look at the table tags. That's a little too like complicated, I think. You could just easily look at these comment tags. Note that the comment tags are also included for what's called, these are Outlook specific handlers. So you will see some stuff like this. The reason that you know it's not the, it's actually part of the main structure of the whole thing and not the Outlook specific stuff is Outlook will always include something called like GTE MSO. It'll be pretty obvious that it's like not the regular content, because otherwise it doesn't have like a human readable name, right? It's some code snippet that you have to use to fix Outlook issues. So in this case here, like S-curve numbers left to right, which would cover sort of the S-curve feature here, which is right underneath the headline. So here's our S-curve features left to right here. And so you can see, even though this is this is still considered an S-curve, we're two column. A lot of people have different names for it. We just call it an S-curve because we take it from multiple different curves. And so you could have like left and right, right and left. It's really just a directional change that you do in order to make that happen. I don't think you guys are really supporting the left and right, but either way, we still call it an S-curve because that's just the design name for it. So here in this case, we have our left panel here, and then we have our right panel. And it's always going to be in this format. We actually keep it strict so that way it's a little bit easier to read. And there are some adjustments that are made to specifically allocate padding between these elements, right? So in this case, you have a full width padded image element here. And how you know that is you consistently see width 100% within this block, which is the first block. As you move on to the additional blocks, you'll start to see things like width 80%. Or if you see a change in the width, that will indicate that we're creating padding with, or what we call relative padding. So in some cases, we will use exact padding. It's not often that we do that. We only do that in cases where we want to have a very pixel exact padding amount. So generally, you'll see this sort of relative padding. And what this does is essentially this image here is, you can see, you just kind of click and drag it to emulate it, but it's just centered within its whole block that it's in. So if we could do some like highlighting here, we can kind of see that, like, you know, the outer edge between these two things, but it's just it's just center aligned within its block, and that's what causes that padding to occur. We'll see the same thing with some of the icons down here as well, specifically for the download buttons like App Store and Google Play. Where you can see here, they are controlled within the amount of space that they take up, and then it's sort of auto-filling it. Now, in some recent changes that we've made, we've added some explicit padding into these to allow it to, especially in the footer, just to make sure on mobile that gets translated. So we'll see a couple of changes with these guys around like a 5-pixel ad, and that just kind of makes sure that that gets carried over into mobile successfully. So some feedback will need to be adjusted in here as it's made in some of the other templates, but yes, essentially we'll use this as like our main reference point. And then we have like our CTAs and other pieces as well. So you can see like here's our CTA button. We have banners, full width banners. Essentially, this is to your kind of go-to spot, right? You'll always want to go to this master template if you want to pull in a new section. And then our headline down here, which was a point of feedback that we were addressing earlier, to kind of go back to that. Bottom banner with app CTAs. So I should be looking at. You can see here again that we just need to make that same fix. It's the wrong spot actually. So we will, and again, you can affect change here right away. Yes, this will actually fix it going forward. But yeah, we'll want to make sure that if we make changes, essentially this goes in general as well, as you make changes to other templates or want to adjust sort of styling for different aspects, we'll want to make sure it's reflected within the master template as well. It's just kind of note that as an item moving forward. Okay, cool. And again, you can go to preview and you can see the different assets. You can see how they're executed on mobile. These are going to be a little full width though. Like again, take this with a grain of salt because you'll be taking chunks of this as part of your testing. But there is essentially the full widthing of some of these elements will cause us to look a little bit funky on this HTML mobile. That's why I say always just look at the test it on your own device and use email and ASIC because that will give you a much more accurate look at it. Okay, cool. So let's say you want to actually rebuild the template or you want to use an existing template that you already have. And you just want to clone it. So let's look at something like, what's a good one here? How about Premiere and Cast Dark? Okay. So first off, we will need to preview it. This gives us the full view. Note that we have image assets here. And again, you can always just kind of highlight to see like where the blocks are. You know, that's kind of an easy way to see like where things go and where things change. Okay, so we have like a good block here. Now let's say we want to make a duplicate of this, right? We want to change some things around. Easiest thing to do is just to take that template and to hit the cog here and to just duplicate. And to update the name here. So we'll call this like, you know, new test program. Okay. And if we save it, that will save the changes that we've made so far. Remember, if you don't hit the save button, your changes aren't saved. So it's one of those things you want to pay attention to and make sure you don't navigate away, although we'll give you a warning if you try to. Okay, so we have our subject line and pre-header here, which you guys are probably streamlined at adding or pretty familiar with. Then you go to the actual body content. And so in this case, you essentially, if you want to edit a specific section, the easiest thing to do is just to look it up. This is what I do, just search for it. And then if I search it in the code, I'll find it here. It's like, oh, great. Okay, so I just need to know I need to edit the text here. So we'll say like, this is amazing! Exclamation point. And then I can see my changes reflected there. And then I know that, okay, you know, this is from a different magazine, so I could either just, again, do the search function and find it again, or I can just look in here. Now note that there is some, you'll see these HTML characters, and this just makes sure that it renders correctly across all devices, including Outlook, which is a big issue with these guys. So you'll see like an N dash in here to showcase an N dash, and this will be, you know, instead of Los Angeles times, this will be, you know, the made-up times. That might be a real publication. Then you have slings and arrows here. You can adjust these images fairly easily. In order to do so, you just need the new image URL that you're going to pull in, and you'll do some updating here. So if you have a little bit of proficiency with HTML, you'll be familiar with the structure here. You have your A tag that actually links the different asset. So let's do this. Let's go ahead and go into some Acorn and grab us a different image that we want to use. And let's say we want to do something on hidden. We could take the image address just from your website directly. That may be sufficient. You may also want to re-upload it. But I think if your image sizes are large enough, they should be sufficient. So in this case, this is a 460 width, I think based on the way that you're structured here. So we probably just want to double this, see if this works. Yeah, look at that. Okay, cool. So you have like a built-in CDN network that's got some nice little handlers here. Generally, you always want to do 2x the image size. So that's why you'll see like 1200 here. Just note that with email, there's like a kind of an upper cap to the size of the image. So something like this may be actually a pretty large size, just given its photography, and they tend to be a little bit meatier. So what I like to do is like I will just let me participants go away. That gets saved. Hidden avatar. Okay, so this is actually downloading it as a WebP, so I actually can't even preview it. Oh well. Either way, if it's like a JPEG file or something like that, you can tend to look at it and just say, okay, maybe that's a little too big, but it looks like this is just delivering a little bit differently. I actually want to confirm that these links work in email, because sometimes different file sizes don't work, so I may be making stuff up as I'm going through here, but doing my best for the example here. Okay, so in this case, we have hidden, so we'll want to update our URL here. And then if on the alt tag, you also want to update this as well. This is mainly for disability. Because not every, well, it's actually disability and slow internet connections is really what it works for. So note that, like, I'm not sure what the mobile networks are like in the UK, personally speaking, but here in the US, like, basically if you're in between the coasts, you're still looking at like 3G networks and, just pretty crappy coverage overall. So when people open up different images inside their mobile clients, their mobile phones, and they're on a 3G network, anything that's over like, like a 800 kilobytes, which is a pretty small image size, will take a while to load, right? It could take like 5 seconds to load, which kind of makes up for a lot of reason why people might abandon an email if there's like a pretty heavy image in front of it. But this alt tag, they will see at least the description of it, so they'll know, okay, this is hidden, So just kind of, and also for people who have disabilities, this helps them kind of understand the content that they're seeing if they can't see it because of color blindness or some other issue that they have. And then last but not least, email clients actually read this alt tag to determine if your content is spam or not. So overall, make sure you update the alt tag for all 3 reasons I stated above, but certainly, it can be a little bit of a pain because you have to find it. Everything else here you do not need to change unless you're changing the size of the image. But again, these are all standardized, so there's no reason why you should need to do that. But if you do need to tweak it to say you want it to be 500 pixels instead of 600, you would simply just adjust all these 600s to 500 in this block here, and that will cover that just in 2 places. Okay, so hidden is a show from I think 2011, so we'll want to say 2011 is coming back, or maybe you can say something like the 10-year anniversary only 4 months away. Oh my God, time flies. So you can just kind of like mess with the content here as you go through. And again, you don't need to change anything here. All of the handlers are built in here to make sure that the padding and everything is consistent. And then the same thing with CTA buttons as you had for images. You just have to go to that href tag and replace it with the appropriate URL, which in this case will be our hidden. Okay. And then for these different images, again, it follows the same pattern as before. These aren't linked. Wherever you see a hash, that means it's not a linked image. So you may see that from time to time. And then again, these images are probably actually square images. We add what's called a border radius on here, which forces this to become a circle with basically a border around it. So that's why you'll see some of that happen, or you'll see these kind of as circular images, is because we're adjusting it within the HTML. So this could also just be a circular image. Yeah, that too. All right, so that works too. But we can kind of use, again, the same concept if we were to like pull in an image that wasn't circular. We could have that same impact, right? And it will do a border radiusing around it. Now you just want to make sure it's a square image, otherwise you'll get this like, like this is a border radius on a wide image, so it makes sense that it looks that way, but square images would be perfect circles. Cool, and then of course, same way if you wanted to edit text or CTAs, it all kind of follows the same pattern. And at the very bottom here, you'd have your dynamic footer automatically pulled in, so you don't have to think about it. If you need to upload images, you can do them directly into Braze, just going to this content library section and clicking add image. It's as easy as just literally dragging and dropping an image. Afterwards, you would click on it. You can click this little image, and then you'll get the URL for that image in here. So like the logos, for example, I'll use these are like uploaded into the platform directly. So you don't have those sail through ones, but a lot of your other stuff is simply using the links from the site or whatever had been there before. Cool. Now we only have a couple minutes left, so I just want to leave it open to any questions that anybody has, or if there's any specific feature you'd like me to run through.
Do you mind explaining what, I know we haven't set any up, but what the link templates are?
I'm sorry, the link templates?
Yeah, up there on the, yeah.
Oh,
Do you know
gotcha.
what those are by any chance?
I think these are...
Oh, is this to set up Google Analytics parameters? I think so.
I think I've used these for, yeah, it looks like it could be for that. That's a good point. I've seen them for, I think we've used these for in-app notifications once for key value pairing with like
Okay.
deep links. That's the only time I've ever used this, but it looks like you could use this for Google Analytics. Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, it looks like it if it has an after URL function,
Yeah.
literally says UTM source. Why not?
Cool.
So that would actually be a pretty cool feature to use there. And let's see if you can add that. I don't know how that gets added in. It might be something that's part of the structure here.
Right.
Either way, it's probably something worth asking or bringing that up with Braze, as I have not really used this feature before.